Hey guys, tonight we slip into a pair of sandals you never asked for, heft a shield that feels like it weighs more than your mattress, and set out on the dusty road toward Thermopylae, the hot gates. You probably won't survive this one, by the way. Not because you're clumsy or slow, but because the math is just not great. 300 Spartans, a scattering of allies. And then on the other side, well, let's just say millions might be an exaggeration, but it's still a whole lot more than you want to fight before bedtime. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love it if you posted your location and local time in the comments. I like seeing where in the world you're tuning in from, and it makes me feel less like I'm whispering into a void. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You march out of Sparta at dawn, the sound of sandals slapping against the packed earth in eerie unison. The sun is still low, casting that golden glow that makes everything look deceptively peaceful, like you're heading out on a picnic rather than into certain death. Your hoplon shield digs into your arm. The dory spear is longer than you expected. It keeps wobbling every time you try to scratch your nose. And your bronze helmet. Congratulations, you've just stuck your head inside a portable oven. The historians call this panoply the full kit of a hoplite, but right now it just feels like you're a walking, sweating bronze figurine. There's comfort, though, in the rhythm of the march. All around you are men who train beside you since childhood. You don't just know their names, you know their scars, their bad jokes, the way one of them snores so loudly you've considered leaving him outside the barracks to be eaten by wolves. The Agoge system drilled this unity into you. Historical fact here: Spartan boys were taken from their families around age 7 to be trained as soldiers. And guess what? That means by the time you're in this column, you've spent most of your life conditioning your body and mind to one purpose: this march toward glorious doom. Someone cracks a joke about Xerxes' army being so big it'll drink rivers dry on its way here. Everyone laughs, but the laugh is brittle dry, like the dust rising off the road. A quirky tidbit: the Persians supposedly had such a massive force that when they shot their arrows, they blotted out the sun. One Spartan soldier is said to have replied, "Good, then we shall fight in the shade." You grin at that. It's witty, but you'd kind of prefer the shade without the whole dodging arrows part. The road takes you northward, winding past hills and olive groves toward that fateful narrow pass between mountain and sea. The allies are joining along the way: Thespians, Thebans, and others, though everyone quietly knows who's doing the heavy lifting in this operation. Sparta may not have the numbers, but it has the reputation. To the rest of Greece, you're the scary older cousin who shows up at family dinners flexing. The march is long, repetitive, and hot. Dust kicks up clinging to your sweaty skin, and you find yourself imagining a nice cold stream. Instead, you get tepid water from a goatskin bag, tasting faintly of leather and regret. The man next to you starts singing a marching song, off key but enthusiastic. It's catchy, and soon you're humming along, even though you secretly hate it. That's the funny thing about exhaustion: it lowers your standards. By midday, the sun is blazing overhead, and your bronze armor feels like a cooking pan left on the fire. You start wondering if the Persians will even need to fight you, or if you'll all just collapse from heat stroke before reaching the hot gates. Historians still argue whether the Spartan march was intentionally slow and ceremonial, partly to show off discipline, or simply the reality of moving armored men across rugged Greek terrain. Either way, your shoulders ache. Your sandals rub blisters into your heels, and you've never been so aware of how heavy your own head feels inside this helmet. Still, there's pride, too. Every step takes you closer to history, or, well, what will later become history. Right now, it just feels like sweaty boredom.
punctuated by the occasional goat smell, and yet you know deep down that something legendary is unfolding. Thermopylae isn't just a battle, it's going to be a story sung and whispered long after your bones turn to dust. And you're one of the extras in that story. Okay, maybe not a leading role, but hey, background soldiers matter too. Somebody has to cheer when Leonidas makes a speech, right? By evening, the camp is set up.
Fires flicker, turning bronze helmets into glowing orange domes. You chew on hard bread and dried meat, both of which taste like punishment, more than nourishment, and wash it down with thin wine. The conversation drifts between bravado and unease. No one says outright that they're scared, but you all know. A kind of heavy silence fills the gaps, broken only by the occasional laugh, too loud a joke, too sharp. Humor is armor, too. As the stars appear, you lie back on your cloak staring at the sky. The Milky Way stretches above you, clear and brilliant. Tomorrow you'll be closer to Thermopylae, closer to that pass where you'll stand against the tide. But tonight, for just a moment, you let the cool night air wash over your sweat, your muscles loosen, and you almost forget that you're marching toward the impossible. Almost. The next morning begins with the rattle of armor and the smell of smoke still clinging to your cloak. You sit up, bones aching from the hard ground, and you realize your neck feels like you spent the night wrestling with a goat, which, to be fair, might have been preferable to lying on sharp pebbles all night. Around you, men are already tightening straps, sliding helmets over sweaty hair, and stomping life back into their feet. The Spartan way doesn't allow much for leisurely mornings. You're up armored and back on the road before your stomach even finishes realizing it's awake. The path toward Thermopylae grows narrower. On your left, jagged mountains rise like teeth. On your right, the sea shimmers blue and endless. It looks beautiful in the morning light, but you know it's a trap waiting to be sprung. If an enemy closes from the front, there's nowhere to run. That's the entire point. The hot gates are a bottleneck, the perfect place to hold off a massive army. At least that's the plan. Plans always sound better in theory than when you're actually sweating into your greaves. You shift your shield again, trying to find a comfortable way to carry something that is fundamentally designed to be uncomfortable. It's a hoplon 3 feet of wood and bronze, heavy as gilt, and round as the sun. Fact check, these shields could weigh up to 15 pounds, and every Spartan hoplite carried one. They weren't just defense, they were also a symbol. If you lost your spear, it was bad luck. If you lost your helmet, maybe forgivable. But if you lost your shield, that was shame, because shields protected the man next to you. You carry it not for yourself, but for the phalanx. The march grows quiet, just the crunch of sandals on gravel and the occasional grunt as someone adjusts a strap. You can almost hear the distant hiss of the sea beside you. The salt tang fills your nostrils, mingling with the stench of unwashed soldiers. Let's just say the Spartan deodorant wasn't a thing. Still, there's a strange sense of invincibility in the air. You and your comrades have been trained to see yourselves as iron, as unbreakable as the bronze on your bodies. One of the men near you breaks into a grin and mutters, "Let Xerxes come with his millions. It just means we won't have to go looking for them." The others laugh and you join in because it beats thinking about what millions really looks like. A quirky tidbit: ancient sources like Herodotus claim Xerxes brought 2 million men to Greece. Modern historians roll their eyes at that number. The logistics alone would have been absurd. Feeding and watering 2 million soldiers? Forget it. More likely, it was somewhere between 70,000 and 300,000. Still, that's not exactly comforting. It's the difference between facing an unstoppable tidal wave or just a slightly smaller unstoppable tidal wave. As the day wears on, you finally reach the Thermopylae Pass. It's not much to look at, just a narrow strip of land, squeezed between mountain cliffs and the sea.
But standing there, you feel the weight of it. This is where history is going to crash like a wave. The rocks jut out like natural walls, and the path itself is so tight that only a few men can stand abreast. You see why Leonidas chose this spot. It's the funnel where size matters less, where skill and discipline can hold back sheer numbers. At least that's the hope. The camp spreads quickly. Tents go up, fires are lit, weapons are checked and rechecked. There's a kind of ritual to it, an orderliness that feels almost comforting. You chew on another meal of bread so hard it could double as a weapon, and dried meat that makes you wonder whether the cook is secretly working for the Persians. Honestly, though you're so hungry, you'd probably gnaw on your own sandal straps if it came to it. Leonidas walks through the camp at dusk. He's not a giant or a godlike figure, but the men straighten up as if the very air around him commands it. He has that presence.
You glance at him and wonder what's running through his mind, whether he's weighing tactics or whether he's silently cursing the oracle at Delphi for this whole mess. Historians still argue whether Leonidas knew from the start that this was a suicide mission. Some say he marched with full knowledge he'd never return. Others think he held out hope that reinforcements might come. Either way, he carries himself like a man who knows the eyes of all of Greece are on him. That night, as you lie under the stars again, the campfire glow flickering against bronze helmets, you feel both fear and pride gnawing at your stomach. Fear because you know the Persians are coming. Pride because you're here, standing shoulder to shoulder with men who've trained for this all their lives. And in the dark, as the sea sighs against the shore, you almost believe you can hold them. You fall asleep to the sound of waves and snores, shield tucked close, spear within reach. Tomorrow the waiting will end. Morning breaks with the screech of gulls overhead and the sharp bite of sea air. You wake stiff and sore, but when you sit up, the camp is already alive. Fires crackle, shields shine with fresh polish, and men move about in practice routines that feel more like clockwork than chaos. You pull your cloak tighter partly for warmth and partly for comfort because you know what's coming. The Persians are on the march, and the hot gates are about to earn their name. Breakfast is hardly what you'd call luxurious bread that could knock a tooth loose, and olives so salty they feel like punishment. But food is food, and you choke it down. Around you, men joke quietly, their voices carrying the forced lightness of those who know their odds aren't great. One soldier mutters, "At least if we fall, we won't have to eat this bread again." Another adds, "Maybe Xerxes will feed us better." The group laughs, though you all know none of you really believes it. Your day begins with drills.
The Spartans insist on order even on the edge of doom. You line up with your comrades, shoulder to shield, spears angled forward like the teeth of some massive bronze beast. The hoplite phalanx is simple in theory, but brutal in practice. Hold your place, protect the man to your left, and never break formation. You feel the weight of your shield digging into your arm, your muscles straining as you brace against your neighbor. Sweat stings your eyes, though the sun is barely climbing. Here's a fact that makes you swallow a little harder. The phalanx was terrifyingly effective. A wall of overlapping shields, spears jutting outward, pushing forward like a living machine. Discipline mattered more than strength. One broken rank could mean disaster. You don't fight as yourself, you fight as part of the wall. You catch a glimpse of the allies who've joined the Spartans, Thespians, Thebans, and other Greeks who've rallied here to make a stand.
They're not as polished as the Spartans, but they've chosen to stand in the jaws of fate with you. There's a strange kind of comfort in that. It's not just Spartans against the world, it's Greeks together. Still, you can't help but notice the way Leonidas and his men stand out straighter, harder trained for this since childhood. They're the spine, holding the Allies upright. By midday, word spreads through the camp. Scouts have spotted the Persian army. The murmurs ripple like a chill through the men. You've heard stories everyone has. An army so vast it drinks rivers dry, stretching beyond sight. Horses, archers, warriors from every corner of the empire. It feels less like you're facing soldiers and more like you're about to face the world itself. A quirky tidbit drifts into your mind. Some accounts say the Persian army was so large that when they marched, the ground shook like an earthquake. Historians debate whether that's poetic exaggeration or eyewitness truth. Either way, your stomach flips imagining it. You climb the rise overlooking the narrow pass. The path ahead looks deceptively small, the mountains squeezing tight against the sea. You imagine what it will look like when the Persians arrive, the noise, the dust, the sheer weight of humanity pressing forward. You glance at the men around you and realize you're part of the dam that's supposed to stop that flood. As evening falls, a messenger rushes in, breathless eyes wide. He's seen them, they're close. By dawn, the Persians will be here. The camp quiets in a strange way. There's no panic, no screaming, just a calm tightening, like the collective drawing of breath before a storm. Men sharpen blades, oil their armor check straps and bindings again and again. You do the same, your hands moving automatically, even as your mind hums with fear. Your spear gleams faintly in the firelight, its tip catching orange against the dark. Leonidas gathers the men. His voice is low, steady, carrying easily in the stillness. He reminds you why you're here, not for survival, not for glory, but to defend Greece, your families, your homes. His words settle into you like stones in a wall. You feel heavier, but stronger too. There's something almost comforting in hearing it aloud that your death might have meaning. When the fires dim and the camp quiets, you lie awake staring at the stars. They're sharp and cold above you, indifferent to the armies gathering below. You think of home, of warm bread, and softer beds of faces you'll likely never see again. Then you close your eyes because sleep is all you can offer yourself before the storm breaks. And as the waves sigh against the shore and the fires burn low, you wait for dawn, the moment when the Persians come and the hot gates ignite with battle. Dawn rises over Thermopylae with the steady pounding of war drums. Not your drums, of course, but theirs.
The sound is distant at first, low enough that you think it could be thunder over the mountains, but soon it swells until the ground itself seems to hum. You stand in line, shield strapped tight, spear angled forward, and you realize this is it. No more drills, no more sharpening your blade, no more what if. Today you fight. The pass funnels you into formation. Shoulder presses against shoulder, shield against shield, the phalanx snapping into place like puzzle pieces. Your world shrinks to the curve of your bronze shield, the sweaty shoulder brushing yours, and the long wooden shaft of your spear braced under your arm. The sun climbs higher, glinting off a forest of spear tips, and you think grimly that you've never looked shinier in your life. If only the occasion were better. The Persians arrive in waves. The first you see are Mede's soldiers sent to test the strength of your line. They look confident enough, their armor glinting, their banners snapping in the wind. But when they charge, their confidence shatters against the wall of shields. You brace, shove forward with the others, and feel the sickening impact reverberate through your whole body. Spears jab out, finding gaps, and men scream on the other side. The Medes fall, stumble, retreat, and then push forward again. It's brutal work, but effective. The narrow pass denies them their numbers. 10 men or 10,000, it doesn't matter when only so many can squeeze through at once. The phalanx holds, and the Medes break like surf against rocks. You realize you're panting, sweating half deaf from the clash of metal and shouts but alive. For now, alive. Here's your mainstream fact of the day. Ancient sources claim the Greeks killed thousands in those first assaults while suffering minimal losses themselves. The Spartan led phalanx was simply that effective in the choke point. Even modern historians admit it was brilliant positioning. Between attacks, there are odd moments of quiet.
You glance sideways and see a Spartan beside you, calmly adjusting his helmet as if he were preparing for dinner rather than facing the largest army in the world. Another chews on a fig, muttering that he'd rather be back home nagging his wife. You laugh, or maybe it's more of a nervous hiccup. Still, it feels strangely good. The Persians send in their best, the immortals, elite soldiers, armored in scales, armed with spears and bows. Their name alone is enough to raise goosebumps, though you can't help but think if they were really immortal, wouldn't they be at home sipping wine instead of risking arrows to the face? When they charge, the fight surges again. Arrows clatter against shields. Spears stab the line wavers, but does not break. You hold push, and somehow, unbelievably, the immortals fall back. Quirky tidbit Herodotus, the father of history, claimed the Spartans combed their long hair before battle.
It wasn't vanity, it was ritual, a way of showing they were prepared to die. Still imagine a row of warriors braiding and fluffing while death marches toward them. Not exactly the mental picture you expected. Right by afternoon, the field stinks of sweat, blood, and smoke. Corpses pile in the pass, and the Persians drag them away to clear the ground. Each charge feels like the world trying to crush you flat, but still you stand. The sun beats down your arm, aches, your ears ring, but you're still in the wall. You're still holding the line. As the day wanes, the Persians fall back once more. You dare to glance over your shoulder at the men around you, tired, bleeding, bent with exhaustion, but still standing tall. The sight fills you with a strange mix of pride and disbelief. You're part of this impossible thing, this wall that refuses to crumble. That night, the camp is quiet, fires glow, men eat in silence, too drained for chatter.
You sip water, chew hard bread, and wonder how many more days like this you can endure. Someone jokes softly that the immortals weren't so immortal after all. A ripple of laughter passes through the weary ranks, thin but real. Historians still argue whether Xerxes expected such resistance or if he thought you'd crumble at the first charge. Either way, you've sent a message the Greeks will not bow easily. When you lie down that night, every muscle aches, but inside you burns a stubborn flicker of pride. You survived the first day at Thermopylae. Against all reason, you're still here. Tomorrow, though, that's another question entirely. Dawn breaks again, this time through a haze of dust and smoke, and you're not sure which aches more, your arm from gripping the spear all day yesterday, or your back from sleeping on rocky ground. Either way, the muscles complain before you even stand. You stretch, hear something pop that probably shouldn't, and mutter that maybe immortal isn't the right word for those Persian elites. After all, it's you and your aching bones who feel eternal. The second day at Thermopylae begins almost the same as the first lineup, shield up, spear forward. The Persians return as relentless as waves. You almost want to admire their determination almost, but admiration fades quickly when arrows start thudding into your shield again. This time, though, you're less shocked. You know the rhythm now, the shove of their charge, the answering push of your line, the desperate crush of bodies until the enemy recoils. Mainstream fact for the day, the Greek line really did hold for 2 full days, inflicting staggering losses on the Persians. Modern estimates vary wildly, but even the most cautious scholars admit it was a slaughter. A handful of Greeks against wave after wave of the King of Kings' army. The math never makes sense, but history doesn't care.
Between charges, you steal quick glimpses around. The Spartan king Leonidas himself walks along the ranks, calm as a man surveying his vineyard. His presence alone steadies the men. You think if he isn't worried, maybe I shouldn't be either. Though privately, you suspect he's just really good at hiding it. That, or he's mastered the art of poker face centuries before cards even exist. Here comes a quirky tidbit. Some ancient accounts claim the Spartans cracked jokes in the middle of the battle, not war cries, not solemn prayers, actual jokes. One supposedly quipped that with so many Persian arrows, we'll fight in the shade. You imagine standing in the press of battle spears, clashing men dying, and still someone finds the energy to drop a one liner. If nothing else, it proves human sarcasm really is timeless, but the day grows hotter, dustier, bloodier. The air fills with grit that sticks to your lips, and your tongue feels like leather.
Each Persian charge chips away at your strength. Even if the line itself holds, you begin to notice the small details, the dent in your shield from that last spear, thrust the nick on your helmet, where an arrow skidded past, the taste of copper in your mouth that won't go away. Survival isn't just about holding the line, it's about not giving in to the weight of fear. Historians still argue whether Xerxes himself watched these clashes from a golden throne set on a nearby hill. Some swear he did, others doubt it. But imagining him there, robed, jeweled, watching thousands of his men crash uselessly against your shield wall, well, it makes you feel oddly smug. Just picture it, the most powerful man in the known world throwing a royal tantrum because a few thousand Greeks won't step aside. By afternoon, the bodies pile up again. The stench becomes almost unbearable. You breathe through your mouth, though it's little better.
The ground is slick, your sandals sticky with things you don't want to identify. Yet still, when the enemy pushes, you push back. The phalanx is more than just a formation. Now it's survival unity, stubbornness made flesh. As the sun lowers, the Persians withdraw once again. The cheers are ragged, exhausted, but real. Against all logic, you've done it again. 2 days still standing, you drop your shield to the ground, flex aching fingers, and wonder how many more times you can repeat this before the body simply refuses. That night in camp, food tastes like sawdust, water like heaven. Men slump around the fires, too tired even for jokes. A Spartan polishes his helmet, another chews bread, another falls asleep. Mid sentence, someone starts humming softly, a lullaby maybe, or just the low mumble of a man too weary to care. The sound carries oddly soothing, like a reminder that even in war, humans cling to the small comforts. You lie down, staring at the stars. They look unchanged, uncaring, exactly as they did yesterday and will tomorrow. It strikes you as both comforting and cruel. You close your eyes, knowing morning will come again, and with it another day of blood and shields. For now, though, you let sleep drag you under. When morning comes, it feels heavier than before, as though the air itself knows what's ahead. Your body resists every movement, but you still strap on the armor, shoulder the shield, and grip the spear. That's the strange magic of battle. You may be terrified, aching, half starved, but routine carries you forward. Step into formation, lock shields, prepare to resist the tide. This third day begins like the others, Persians pressing, Greeks pushing back. But you can sense something has shifted. The attacks come harder, sharper, as if Xerxes has finally decided patience isn't his strong suit. The first crash of bodies rattles your bones. Your shield arm screams from the impact. You hold anyway.
That's what you do now. You hold, because letting go means death, not just for you, but for the man beside you. Mainstream fact here on the third day: The Persians gain their fateful advantage thanks to betrayal. A local Greek Ephialtes revealed to Xerxes a hidden mountain path that bypassed the narrow pass. This allowed the Persian army to flank the defenders. You, of course, don't know this yet. You just feel the battle's energy turn ominous like storm clouds gathering out of sight. The Persians come again and again. You push them back. At some point, your mind goes strangely blank, as though survival runs on autopilot. Raise shield, thrust spear, pull back, repeat. The rhythm becomes so familiar, you could almost fall asleep, standing there if not for the shrieks, the blood spray, and the constant reminder that the man opposite you very much wants you dead. Here's a quirky tidbit. Ancient sources suggest the Spartans fought with such ferocity that Persians believed them to be half crazed or possessed. Imagine being so stubbornly aggressive that your enemies start filing reports like, "We swear these guys are not normal humans." In fairness, when you see a Spartan break into laughter after dodging a spear thrust, you kind of understand the confusion. Then it happens. Whispers ripple down the line like wildfire. The Persians have found a way around. You glance at your comrades, and for the first time, you see something close to fear in Spartan eyes. Not panic, but the realization that the odds have turned completely. The pass you've defended so stubbornly is no longer an impenetrable wall. It's about to become a trap. Historians still argue whether Leonidas knew the betrayal was coming or if the shock struck suddenly. Either way, the choice he made defined the legend. Most of the allied Greek forces were dismissed, sent home to fight another day, while the Spartans and a handful of loyal allies, like the Thespians, chose to stay. When the news reaches you, it feels like the ground disappears beneath your feet. Go home, live, or stand here side by side with men who've already decided this is the end. You realize there's no real decision at all. You've fought, bled, survived this long. To walk away now, when those beside you face certain death, feels unthinkable. So you stay, shield in hand, spear in grip, heart pounding, you stay. The fighting grows wilder, less orderly. Spears break. Men switch to swords, daggers, anything sharp. The clash is constant, a blur of screams and steel. Dust blinds your eyes, sweat stings your cuts, and the taste of blood fills your throat. You barely notice when the sun climbs high, then starts to fall again. Time ceases to mean anything.
It's all just moments strung together. Strike block. Breathe. By evening, the Persians have closed in from behind. You're surrounded. The realization hits like a hammer. This is it. Not a question of if, but when. Strangely, a calm settles over you. Maybe it's exhaustion. Maybe it's acceptance. Or maybe it's that dark Spartan humor rubbing off. You look at your bruised, filthy comrades and think, well, at least the shade will be nice. The camp that night is nothing like before. There's no food, no water, no chatter, just silence broken occasionally by someone sharpening a blade or whispering a prayer. You find a flat rock, sit, and stare at your hands. They're trembling. You tell yourself it's from fatigue, not fear. But deep down, you know better. And yet, in that silence, there's also something fierce, a strange pride. You know tomorrow your story ends, but you also know people will talk about this stand, maybe even remember your name, or maybe not. But the tale itself will live, and somehow that feels enough. Dawn rises on the last day, though calling it day feels wrong. It's more like the dim glow of a stage light illuminating an already written ending. You wake from shallow, broken sleep, the kind where your dreams are just reruns of the battle you'll soon fight again. Every muscle in your body protests as you stand, but stand you do. Shield strapped on spear in hand, feet braced in the dirt, you're still here. The Persians don't wait long. You hear them before you see them, the steady drumbeat of boots, the sharp bray of horns, the rattle of countless weapons. Then they appear massed in waves so vast it feels almost comical. You glance at the man next to you and mutter something like, "Guess we're popular." He snorts, even grins. Humor, still your best armor. Mainstream fact here: Leonidas and the remaining Spartans, Thespians and Thebans, fought to the last man.
The pass was no longer defensible, but the point wasn't to hold it, was to fight until every drop of strength was gone to carve their defiance into memory. You pressed shoulder to shoulder, step forward into that legacy. Whether you asked for it or not, the clash is immediate, overwhelming. Shields crash together with a sound like thunder. Spears snap like twigs. You're shoved backward, shoved forward, jostled like driftwood in a storm. A spearhead grazes your thigh. You barely notice. Your shield arm throbs. You force it steady. You thrust your spear again and again until it splinters, and you're forced to draw your short sword. Close now, too close. You smell the sweat and fear of the man trying to kill you. You smell your own. Quirky tidbit: some ancient account suggests the Spartans sang as they fought, their voices echoing through the pass like a grim choir.
Imagine being a Persian soldier charging a wall of battered warriors who, instead of groaning or screaming, belt out what sounds like a battle hymn karaoke session. Terrifying, yes, a little absurd. Also, yes, the pressure grows unbearable as Persian numbers pour in from the front and the rear. The mountain pass has become a funnel of chaos, and you're in the middle of it. Blades flash, arrows hiss, bodies fall, and you're slipping in blood that coats the stones. Still, you fight. What else is there? At one point, the line buckles, Spartans dragging you into a defensive circle. Leonidas himself battered, but unbroken shouts commands through the din. His presence steadies you. If he's still standing, so can you. But then he falls. The exact details are lost. Historians still argue whether he was pierced by spears, struck down by arrows, or toppled in a crush of enemies. But what you see is a king collapsing into the dust. For a heartbeat, despair spikes sharp and cruel. Yet the Spartans rally around his body, fighting with a ferocity that feels more beast than human. You're pulled into the maelstrom, hacking, blocking, gasping. The Persians press harder, determined to seize the corpse of Leonidas, as though claiming his body will erase his defiance. You refuse to let them. None of you will. Time fractures. You no longer know if it's minutes or hours. Your arms are numb, your sword chipped, your vision tunneling. The circle shrinks tighter and tighter, fewer shields, fewer voices. You're vaguely aware that arrows rain down, blotting the sky with dark streaks. One slams into your shield, another bites into your shoulder. You stagger, yet keep swinging. Historians still argue whether the last Spartans truly fought to the very last man, or if a handful surrendered or fled. But in your world, in this moment, surrender doesn't exist. Flight doesn't exist.
There is only the fight, only the wall of bodies closing around you, only the weight of history pressing down, like the arrows overhead. When the final rush comes, it feels almost like relief. You see a flash of sunlight on bronze, feel the slam of bodies, hear a crack like thunder, and then the world narrows to a blur of red and sound. Pain blossoms sharp, then dull, then fades into something strangely peaceful. The earth greets you hard, but not unkindly. You land among comrades, some still fighting, some already still. Above you, arrows whistle like a storm. Around you, the clash continues, a fading roar. You close your eyes, grip your sword one last time, and let the darkness come. Your story ends here, but your tale, does not. The pass at Thermopylae will echo with your defiance for centuries, a reminder that even in defeats, courage can outlast empires. Silence settles over you, or at least what your ears interpret as silence, after the deafening thunder of combat. It isn't the silence of peace, it's the muted ringing that comes after hours of clashing metal and screams. For a moment, you think you finally slipped into death's embrace, but no, you blink, and the world is still there, fractured, broken, but there. Bodies cover the narrow paths like driftwood after a flood. Spartans, Thespians, Persians, all lie tangled together, indistinguishable, except for their armor. Your breath rattles in your chest. Every inhalation is an effort. Every exhalation feels like surrender. Yet your fingers still clutch the hilt of your sword knuckles, pale under grime. Somehow you're still alive. Persian soldiers move among the fallen spears, stabbing down to finish the living. You close your eyes, trying to become another corpse, willing your chest to still. It almost works, almost. A spear point jabs into your leg, sharp enough to make you grunt. The soldier leans in, eyes narrowing. He hesitates. Maybe it's your battered armor. Maybe it's sheer luck. But another shout calls him away, and he runs to join his fellows. You exhale quietly, cursing the sound for betraying you. Here's the mainstream fact. After the last stand, the Persians cleared the battlefield, executing any survivors, then desecrated Leonidas's body in anger. His head was displayed on a stake, a gruesome warning to all Greece. You don't see this directly. Your position in the bloodied heap spares you from witnessing the exact moment, but whispers among Persian soldiers carry enough to chill your spine. Yet even in this devastation, odd details linger. Quirky tidbits, some accounts mention that dogs roamed the battlefield afterward, scavenging among the fallen. The image is absurd, and grim heroic warriors reduced to a buffet line for strays. It's the sort of detail history teachers usually skip, but it sticks because it makes the grandeur human again. You drift in and out of consciousness as the day passes. Heat presses down. Flies buzz mercilessly. The stench of blood and death fills your lungs. You think about water, about bread, about the strange comfort of the barracks back home. You think about jokes told around campfires, the laughter of comrades, now silent forever. And you think about the reality check. You're probably not surviving this one, not unless some miracle pulls you from the pile. But miracles, like historians argue, some say a handful of Greeks were spared as slaves, dragged off in chains to Persia. Others suggest no one left that field alive. Historians still argue whether stray survivors slipped into legend or whether every last defender truly perished. In your haze, the possibility flickers: are you one of them, or just another body waiting to be claimed by the sun? At some point, Persian soldiers build cairns and burn pyres for their own dead, the smoke drifting thick into the mountain air. You cough, the acrid taste coating your throat. For the fallen Greeks, there's no ceremony yet, just silence and scavengers. You're too weak to move, too numb to care. You wonder if this is how history gets written, not in the clash of shields, but in the quiet, anonymous deaths that follow. Night creeps in. The battlefield cools, shadows stretching across the pass. You stare at the stars overhead, those same stars you watched on easier nights, and find strange comfort in their indifference. They look down on this battle, they'll look down on the next, and the next after that. Empires rise, empires fall, but the stars, those smug little dots, don't care. And yet, lying there, half dead, you realize something. The point wasn't survival. It wasn't even victory. It was the story. You, Leonidas, the Spartans, the Thespians, you've written yourselves into something bigger, carved your names into the stone of time. The Persians may desecrate bodies, but they can't erase the fact that for 3 days, a handful of men stood against the tide of an empire. You close your eyes again, exhaustion pulling you under. Whether you wake or not doesn't matter anymore, because in the echoing corridors of history, you've already survived your defiance, a permanent flame in the memory of humanity. The next time your eyes open, it's not from a soldier's spear or the sting of smoke. It's the buzz of flies and the scrape of sandals over stone. Voices murmur above you, low and tense, speaking in Greek. For a moment, you think you've finally slipped into the afterlife, greeted by familiar tones. But no, these are not gods. They're men. A shadow falls over your face. One of the figures crouches, hand hovering uncertainly above your chest. Alive, he whispers. Relief mixes with disbelief in his voice. Two more men appear ragged, covered in dust. They aren't Persians.
They're locals, shepherds maybe, or deserters who waited until nightfall to creep onto the battlefield. You don't know if they're saviors or scavengers, but at this point, you don't care. They tug you from the pile of corpses, muttering prayers to the gods as though pulling a ghost into the world of the living. Every tug tears at your wounds, but you grit your teeth, grateful for the agony because it means you're still here. They carry you away, not down the road the Persians patrol, but into the rugged foothills, winding through goat trails and hidden passes. Here's your mainstream historical fact. While the Persian army pressed forward after Thermopylae, some local Greeks did rescue stragglers, sneaking them past patrols. Survivors occasionally made it back to their home cities, bringing first-hand accounts of the battle. Without those voices, the story of the last stand might never have spread as it did.
The quirky tidbit: some versions say that a few Persian soldiers themselves looked the other way, letting wounded Greeks slip into the mountains. Maybe it was pity, maybe admiration, or maybe just laziness on a long campaign. Hard to say, but it adds a strange human layer to the clash of empires, compassion smuggling itself into war. You stumble through the night, leaning on your rescuers until you collapse in a cave, smelling of damp stone and sheep. A trickle of water glistens in the back. You drink greedily, nearly choking, as though the liquid itself could stitch your body back together. The men offer you a scrap of bread stale, but to you it's nectar of the gods. As the hours pass, pain becomes background noise. You listen as the men talk among themselves. They speak of Persian patrols scouring the countryside of Greek cities, debating whether to submit or resist. News travels faster than armies, carried on the tongues of the traders and travelers.
The story of Leonidas is already spreading, weaving itself into myth before the last embers of the funeral pyres cool. Historians still argue whether Leonidas' sacrifice truly united the Greeks or whether it was later propaganda polished to inspire. Maybe the Spartans just died in vain and the larger victories came only later at Salamis or Plataea. But lying in that cave with bread in your stomach and water easing your throat, it doesn't feel like propaganda. It feels like raw survival hammered into legend. Sleep drags you down again, but not before one last realization. You are now a thread in that story. Not one of the heroes sung about in poems, not a name carved on a monument, but a survivor who carries the tale. And in a world where words can echo longer than swords, that might just be the most dangerous role of all. When you wake again, the first thing you notice is silence, the kind that feels almost staged, as if the world is holding its breath.
Then a sheep bleats from outside the cave, and the spell breaks. Your rescuers are gone. Only one man remains, an older fellow with wiry arms and a face lined like a dried olive. He glances up from sharpening a knife. "You live," he says, like it's both a curse and a compliment. He explains in hushed tones that the Persians now control the pass. Thermopylae is sealed off, littered with the bodies of men who swore they would never retreat. But stories he adds slip through where swords cannot. He hands you a water skin and jerky gestures toward the east. Go home. Tell them. Easier said than done. Every step down the goat trail is like fire in your muscles. You limp through the hills, clutching your side, hiding when Persian patrols pass. You notice something odd. Some locals bow their heads to Persian soldiers while others spit in the dirt after they march by. Loyalty, you realize, is a currency as fragile as any coin. Here's your historical fact. After Thermopylae, Xerxes indeed took control of central Greece, even burning Athens to the ground later. But the Spartan stand had bought just enough time for the rest of Greece to rally, laying groundwork for the naval clash at Salamis. Without that delay, the story might have ended very differently. For your quirky tidbit, there are accounts that some Greeks actually went to Xerxes willingly after the battle, offering loyalty in exchange for safety. One town supposedly welcomed him with garlands and gifts. Survival has its own logic, even if it makes for a less glamorous bedtime story. You make it through hills dotted with olive trees and rough shepherd huts, finally finding refuge in a small village. The people there eye you suspiciously, torn between fear of Persians and curiosity about the broken figure on their doorstep. When they learn where you've come from, whispers spread. A Spartan survived, someone mutters.
It's not entirely accurate. You weren't Spartan born, but who's counting when rumor carries more weight than truth? At night, children gather around you by the fire, eyes wide. They ask if Leonidas really stood tall until the end, if the Spartans laughed in the face of death. You nod throat tight because you know they need the story more than they need the messy details. And as you speak, you feel the legends start to grow like vines wrapping around the ruins of fact. Historians still argue whether survivors exaggerated or sanitized their stories to inspire resistance. Did they remember what happened or what they wanted others to believe? It doesn't matter much now because the effect is the same. Your words set sparks in tired eyes, and those sparks will become torches carried to the next village, then the next city. By the time you lay your head down on straw, you understand something strange. You didn't just escape Thermopylae, you carried it with you. And though you still feel like a cracked pot leaking sand, maybe your cracks are what let the fire through. Morning brings the kind of hunger that feels like punishment. You gnaw the last strip of jerky drink, the final mouthful of stale water, and step back onto the road. Dust rises around your ankles, clinging like ghosts of those left behind. The mountains begin to fall away, and the land opens into fields where farmers bend over wheat and barley. They glance up as you pass, quick, nervous glances, like they're checking whether you carry bad news, and you do, though you're not sure you should deliver it. Your path eventually leads you toward the city states further south. You pass shrines by the roadside, small stone altars blackened by ash, dedicated to Hermes, Athena, even Dionysus. People leave bread figs and cheap wine, hoping the gods are still listening after the slaughter. You pour a trickle of water on one altar yourself, whispering a half formed prayer, not for victory, but for memory. One shepherd you meet insists you stop for a meal. He asks what happened at Thermopylae, eyes burning with anticipation. When you tell him pieces of the truth, that Leonidas fell, that the Spartans stood until the last breath, he sits back stunned as if you've handed him a prophecy. They will sing of this, he says firmly, when Persia is nothing but a memory. You almost laugh because right now Persia looks like a juggernaut, not a fleeting shadow. But you let him believe it. Belief is stronger than bread. Here's the historical fact for you. News of Thermopylae really did spread quickly, Through Greece, and the courage of the Spartans and their allies became a rallying cry. The sacrifice helped unify city states that were otherwise fractious and suspicious of each other. Without that story, the unity at Salamis and Plataea might never have happened. And for the quirky tidbit, some reports say a few survivors, especially the Thespians, faced harsh criticism for leaving. Can you imagine that, surviving the meat grinder of Thermopylae, limping home scarred for life, only to have neighbors sneer, "Why didn't you die like a hero, tough crowd?" As you keep moving, you begin to realize your survival is a burden. People project their own hopes onto you. Some call you a hero, others call you a coward, and neither label fits comfortably. You didn't choose to live, you just didn't die. Yet with each retelling, your part in the story grows larger, like a snowball rolling downhill. Soon, you're less a man and more a symbol, living proof that the stand at Thermopylae wasn't in vain. Historians still argue whether survivors embellished their stories to inspire the Greeks, or whether later writers did the embellishing for them. Either way, legends are rarely clean.
You find yourself tempted to add flourishes too, to claim Leonidas gave you a nod before the final charge, or that you held the pass until your sword snapped. You don't, though. You stick to the details. You remember messy, fragmented, unfinished, because even broken memories can fuel a fire. That night, you lie beneath an olive tree, the stars cold and clear. You dream not of death, but of laughter, the laughter of Spartans who joked even with spears in their guts. It's a strange comfort, like the echo of courage borrowed for a moment longer. And when dawn comes, you rise again, less a soldier now, more a wandering storyteller with scars for credentials. Maybe that's the role left for you, not to fight, but to carry words sharper than steel. The road stretches toward Athens, and with each dusty mile, you hear rumors thick as smoke. Farmers whisper that Xerxes' army still swarms across Greece like locusts. Merchants mutter that cities are falling temples, looted women and children enslaved. Yet there's also talk of ships being built of sailors, training day and night, of a fleet gathering to meet Persia at sea. You are walking inside a country on the brink, both terrified and galvanized. When you crest a hill and see the Acropolis rising in the distance, marble gleaming against the sky, it's like stumbling into another world. Athens hums with life. Even under the shadow of invasion, it refuses to shrink. Craftsmen hammer bronze, slaves carry amphorae of oil, and citizens debate politics in voices that carry across the agora. You, road worn and scarred, step into the city like a living message from Thermopylae. Almost immediately, word spreads. You're pulled into the swirl of Athenian curiosity. Philosophers ask for the tactics used at the pass. Priests ask if the gods truly stood beside the Spartans. Children tug at your tunic, begging to hear about the heroes who fought the giants. You've become the embodiment of an idea living testimony that sacrifice might buy time. The historical fact here, Athens really did evacuate much of its population before the Persians arrived, sending women and children to safer islands while preparing its fleet for battle. It was a daring strategy rooted in the belief that ships, not walls, would save Greece. For the quirky tidbit, one account says that after the battle, when word reached Athens, they staged plays and poetic recitals retelling the stand at Thermopylae almost immediately, because in Greece, even tragedy had to pass through the theater first. Nothing like getting your trauma processed with a chorus and a lyre. Yet amid the admiration, you feel uneasy. You didn't ask to become a story. The Athenians polish your tale until it shines brighter than truth. They want heroes who never faltered, warriors who laughed in the face of death, men who carried divine light in their eyes. You remember instead the sweat, the stink, the cracked lips, the desperate fear you shoved down again and again. Historians still argue whether the Greeks consciously mythologized Thermopylae from the beginning or whether later centuries inflated it. Was it propaganda or was it genuine awe? Probably both. Humans have a talent for editing reality until it fits their needs. A priest invites you to stand before the people and speak. You hesitate, then climb the steps of the platform. The crowd stares up at you, thousands of faces shining in torchlight. Your throat tightens. What can you possibly give them? You clear your voice and say only this: they stood until they could not stand anymore. Remember them. The words hang in the air, heavy and simple. The crowd roars, not because your speech was clever, but because it was enough. Sometimes less is more, except with baklava, then more is definitely more. That night, Athenians press gifts on you, bread olives, even a warm cloak.
You refuse much of it, though you keep the cloak. You're not an idiot. You wander the streets as the city sings, and for the first time, you feel the strange burden of being alive when so many others are not. In the quiet hours before dawn, as the Parthenon looms above you, you whisper an apology to the dead. You are their echo now, whether you want it or not. Morning in Athens tastes like smoke. You rise with the sun and hear the clanging of bronze from the Piraeus, the city's port, where shipbuilders labor as if their hammers could beat back Persia itself. You walk there past long rows of triremes, sleek, narrow warships with three banks of oars. They look fragile compared to Xerxes' hulking army, but they are fast, deadly, and designed to slice through an enemy like a shark through a school of fish. An Athenian naval officer smelling of pitch and seawater greets you with a grin. You fought at Thermopylae. Then you'll appreciate this: wooden walls.
He runs a hand over the smooth planks of the trireme. The phrase wooden walls had been uttered by the oracle at Delphi, and Athenians chose to interpret it not as their city's stone fortifications, but as their navy. A bold gamble. You eye the trireme and think, if salvation looks like this, let's hope the gods like carpentry. A historical fact: Athens built around 200 triremes by this time, funded by the silver mines at Laurium. That silver was supposed to be shared among the people, but a certain politician named Themistocles convinced them that survival was worth more than pocket change. Good sales pitch, really. The quirky tidbit rowers who powered these ships weren't just slaves or poor men. Many were free citizens sweating shoulder to shoulder below deck. Imagine modern CEOs and janitors crammed in the same space, pulling in unison, trying not to suffocate on each other's garlic breath. That's democracy for you. Historians still argue whether the triremes truly leveled the playing field, or if Greek victory at sea was more about Persian overconfidence. Did the narrow straits of Salamis decide the outcome, or was it just bad luck for the Persians? Either way, strategy and geography teamed up like best friends to humiliate an empire. As you linger by the docks, the officer offers you a place aboard. You decline. Land is treacherous enough. The sea feels like begging Poseidon to notice you. Instead, you help with smaller tasks, sharpening weapons, carrying supplies, even sharing advice about what it's like to face Persians in the flesh. Men gather around, wide-eyed, as you describe the size of their army, the gleam of their armor, the endless beat of their war drums. You don't need to exaggerate. The truth already sounds impossible. Later, you join a festival held in honor of the fallen. The Athenians pour libations of wine-burned incense and recite poems about Leonidas and his men. A boy recites lines so grandiose you can't help but smirk. Apparently, the Spartans fought with flames in their eyes, thunder in their voices, and laughter on their lips. You remember them instead coughing dust, swatting flies, and muttering curses about rations. But sure, thunder and flames sound cooler on a stage. The wine flows freely, and soon You're swept into dancing. You've never been much of a dancer, but the Athenians don't mind. Half of them are stomping and spinning in a rhythm only they seem to hear. A man tells you proudly, "This is how we honor the dead, with joy." You stumble along sweaty, laughing, and for a moment you forget the blood and the smoke of the pass. Then, as night falls, you walk back toward the Acropolis and see torches lining the hill. Priests chant prayers for the gods' protection, their voices echoing against stone. You stand on the edge of the crowd, cloak pulled tight, and feel the mingling of fear and defiance in the air.
The Persians are still coming, but Athens refuses to bow. You realize something. Thermopylae was not the end. It was the beginning of a story that will now weave through every Greek heart city, ship by ship. And you somehow are one of its keepers. You don't know if you like that role, but you will play it. Because if the gods love a good tale, then maybe, just maybe, they'll love the teller enough to let him see it through. The weeks pass, and whispers of battle cling to every street corner in Greece like smoke that refuses to fade. You travel south from Athens, walking dusty roads lined with olive groves, and everywhere you go, people want to hear your story. You've become something of a traveling bard, though your instrument is memory rather than a lyre. Children gather around you, wide eyed, clutching figs in sticky hands, as you tell them about the wall of shields at Thermopylae. Their parents nod grimly, some squeezing your shoulder, others pressing bread into your hands as if to fortify you for the road ahead. You're not sure what you've done to deserve their kindness after all you didn't win, but in their minds, merely surviving has made you part of something greater. At Delphi, you climb the sacred slopes where the Pythia once spoke. The oracle's prophecies still float in the air like incense. Trust in your wooden walls. A great empire will fall. Nobody says which empire. That's the trick with oracles. They hedge their bets better than gamblers in a tavern. Historians still argue whether the oracle truly supported the Greeks or just tried to avoid being squashed by Persia. You imagine the Pythia smirking behind her veil, amused that people will still be debating her riddles thousands of years later. The priests at Delphi treat you like a relic, leading you to an altar blackened with burnt offerings.
They ask for your account of Leonidas and his men, and you speak slowly, trying to honor them without slipping into drunken exaggeration. You describe the dust, the press of shields, the moment Leonidas fell. The crowd sighs, some weeping openly, others gritting their teeth in determination. Then someone cries out, "We will not let their sacrifice be in vain." The shout ripples through the assembly until even you find yourself yelling it, voice hoarse, echoing against the cliffs. Later, you join a funeral rite for soldiers whose names nobody knows. Priests chant, flutes wail, and incense rises in heavy coils. You think of your fallen comrades, but you also think of the Persians lying dead at the pass. Were they honored back home? Did their families cry the same tears? You push the thought aside. Sympathy feels dangerous. It threatens to blur the lines of enemy and friend, and you know the Greeks need those lines sharp right now. A quirky tidbit strikes you as you wander in some towns. Women leave small cakes of sesame and honey at shrines for the spirits of the dead. When you ask why, an old woman explains, "So they don't grow hungry in Hades and come back to trouble us." You nod politely, though you privately think if you were a ghost, honey cakes wouldn't exactly lure you back. Maybe a good roast lamb, or at least some wine that didn't taste like tree sap. The road eventually leads you to Corinth, a city buzzing with merchants and sailors. Here, strategy is debated more fiercely than prices in the marketplace. One faction argues the Greeks should abandon the land entirely and trust only in their navy. Another insists they must stand firm on the soil of their ancestors. You sit at a tavern table sipping sour wine, listening as men nearly come to blows over these questions. Their passion is contagious, but it also unnerves you.
If Greeks fight each other this much, how will they unite against Persia? At night, you find yourself dreaming strange dreams. In one, Leonidas places his hand on your shoulder and says, "The wall must hold." In another, you're rowing a trireme through seas of fire, while Xerxes himself laughs from a throne of waves. You wake sweating heart racing and wonder if these are omens or just the result of too much cheese before bed. Either way, they remind you that the war is far from over. The next morning, you stand on a hill overlooking the Isthmus of Corinth, where thousands of laborers dig trenches and raise walls of stone and timber. This is Greece's new line of defense. You watch men sweat under the sun, their picks ringing against rock, their curses rising like prayer. It's impressive, but you can't shake the feeling that walls only delay the inevitable. You've seen how Persia moves like a tide swallowing barriers with sheer force, and tides always return. Still, there's something stirring in the air. Every city, every farmer, every sailor now knows the name Thermopylae. The sacrifice has become a rallying cry, stitched into songs, etched into stone. Even in defeat, it has become a victory of the spirit. You sense that Greece is no longer a loose collection of squabbling towns, but a people bound by memory, anger, and hope. And you, just one scarred survivor, have been carried along with it. You aren't a Spartan king, nor a famed general, but when people look at you, they see proof that the story is real, that it happened, that it mattered. You realize with a mix of pride and dread that you have become part of history's glue. As you leave Corinth, a boy runs after you, pressing a small wooden figurine into your hand. It's a crude carving of a hoplite shield and spear, barely distinguishable, but his smile is earnest. "For luck," he says. You tuck it into your cloak and walk on the road stretching ahead toward battles yet unwritten.
The journey south takes you towards Sparta, where the grief is heavier than stone. By the time you reach the valley of the Eurotas River, the entire city has already heard every version of Thermopylae's tale: how Leonidas stood unflinching, how the Spartans mocked death with their last breath, how the pass became a graveyard for the proudest warriors of Greece. When you walk into the agora, people stare, some whispering, others openly pointing. You half expect them to curse you for surviving, while their sons and husbands did not. Instead, a woman approaches her face, lined and her hands calloused from years of work. She clasps your wrist and says, "Thank you for standing with him." You realize she must have been Leonidas's kin, or perhaps just someone who loved him, like all Spartans did. The funerals here are unlike any you've seen. Spartan women, daughters, sisters, mothers, lead the dirges, their voices raw, echoing against the hills.
They weep not only for the men lost, but for the honor that binds them. One woman cries so fiercely, you fear she'll tear her throat apart, but no one restrains her. In Sparta, mourning is as much a weapon as a spear. It carves memory into flesh. You stand among them, head bowed, until someone presses a cloak over your shoulders. Wear it, they insist. You were one of us. As the days stretch into weeks, you find yourself drawn into training grounds once more. Spartans do not pause their drills, even in mourning. In fact, their rhythm seems harsher now, their voices louder, as though they're training not just for the next war, but to drown their grief. You join them, your shield arm trembling with fatigue, your thighs burning from endless crouches. At night, you collapse, but the familiar pain brings a strange comfort. It means you're still worthy of standing in their ranks. Yet even here, debate brews.
Some Spartans whisper that Thermopylae was a glorious triumph of spirit, while others murmur it was a reckless waste. Historians still argue whether Leonidas sought only glory or if he truly believed the stand could halt Persia. You sense both truths mingling together, impossible to separate like wine poured into water. One evening after drills, a young Spartan boy sidles up to you. His voice cracks as he asks, "What did it feel like when they came?" You see in his eyes the mix of terror and hunger for glory. You pause, unsure how to answer. Finally, you say it felt like being crushed by the sea. But we learned that even the sea can be resisted, if only for a while. He nods solemnly as though you've handed him a secret. Maybe you have. A quirky detail lingers in your mind. Spartan cooks sometimes sprinkle crushed olives into their infamous black broth, claiming it gives strength. You try it once, spooning the greasy mixture into your mouth, and nearly gag. You whisper to yourself that Persia could have been defeated more easily if only someone had forced them to eat it. Humor is the only seasoning strong enough to make the broth bearable. But laughter fades when news arrives. Xerxes has marched deeper into Greece, burning villages, looting shrines, leaving ashes where olive groves once stood. Panic spreads, but so does defiance. The stories of Thermopylae have taken root like stubborn weeds, and instead of crushing Greek spirit, the Persian advance only hardens it. Word of a coming sea battle at Salamis reaches your ears. Ships are being readied, oars carved, sails patched. It seems Greece's fate will be decided on the waves, not the mountains. You look back on your path and realize how far you've carried this story. From the dust of Thermopylae to the incense of Delphi, the arguments of Corinth, and the grief of Sparta, you've become both a witness and a vessel. The weight is heavy, but it's also strangely steadying.
You know now that history doesn't belong to kings alone. It belongs to anyone who survives long enough to tell it. And here in the quiet before the next storm, you finally let yourself breathe. The mountains are far behind, the sea lies ahead, and the road between them hums with uncertainty. For tonight, though, you sit by the fire cloak, wrapped tight wooden figurine in your hand. The flames crackle the stars' wheels silently above, and you whisper the names of the fallen like a lullaby. Leonidas, Dionychus, Alpheus, Maron. Your voice softens words, stretching like the night itself. Sleep tugs at you gentle and insistent. The war will come again, but not yet. For now, memory is enough. The fire grows smaller embers glowing faintly, and the voices of Sparta's grief fade into the hush of night. You lie back, staring up at the heavens, where the constellations seem brighter than they've ever been. The air is cool against your skin, carrying the faint scent of pine and earth. Your body, battered and scarred, finally loosens its grip on tension, as though even your muscles know the story has been told. Slowly, your breathing steadies. Each inhale is a little deeper, each exhale a little longer, carrying with it the weight of memory and exhaustion. The mountains of Thermopylae drift further away in your mind, their rocky slopes softened by distance. The clash of shields, the roar of voices, the thrum of arrows, all of it dissolves, leaving only silence. And in that silence, a strange peace. You remember the boy's wooden figurine resting in your cloak. You picture it now tiny, almost laughably crude, but carrying more strength than polished bronze. It is proof that even small things endure. Perhaps you too will endure, just another soul carried along by history's tide. The night deepens, the stars wheel slowly overhead, and time seems to stretch thin, like a calm sea at dawn. The world softens around you, sounds blur, thoughts drift. So let the story settle now, like dust after battle. Let it sink into the soil, into memory, into rest. Close your eyes. The war will rage on without you tonight, And for now, sleep is victory enough. End of script. Sweet dreams.